Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome home to Torah. A very warm welcome home to Torah. This is not the Yiboneh Beit Midrash, although that's where our real home is, and we are still hanging out at Eretz Chemda, where they're making tzitzis and unbelievable distribution to all the families who are displaced, needs for the families, as well as equipment for our soldiers. And if you're interested in receiving our email with the sheets, specifically the source sheets that we use, because we do encourage you to learn Hebrew, please send me an email. But if you want to use them, you can get them off of the website. Down below in the description box is a link where you can at least get the Hebrew sheets. If you're interested in the English sheets, that you have to sign up for specifically to receive. The other thing is we're still in the midst of a war, and there's a great demand for tzitzis. That's why we're here, never ending, making tens of thousands of tzitzis because the chayalim want tzitzis, and we're also distributing tefillin, and that's a little bit more expensive, right? The difference between a 30 shekel item and a 3,500 shekel item. But nevertheless, there's a great demand, and we're trying to supply that demand. So for those who are unfamiliar, we use the Yakar as the basis for our discussion, and we're going to talk about unbelievable stuff. The name Yakov was changed to Israel, and we're going to discuss because there is an idea that even though God says in chapter 35, verse 10, God said to him, "Your name is Yakov. Your name shall no longer be called Yaakov, but Israel shall be your name." And he named him Israel. So here the Hebrew, the Omer Elokim, Shimcha Yakov. It says your name is Yaakov, and I'm stressing that. Lo Yikare Shimcha Od Yakov. But it also says your name shall no longer be called Yaakov. So before we even go further, what is it? Is it Yaakov? Is it not Yaakov? Okay, the verse then says his name is Yisrael. The problem that anybody who knows the Tanakh should have, what happens by Avraham? In chapter 17 of Genesis, verse 5, very similar language, your name shall no longer be called Avram, but your name shall be Abraham. So, V'lo Yikara Od Es Shimcha Avram. So no longer are we going to call him Avram, V'hoya Shimcha Avraham. Now, why is this so important? Because, as you will know, we're going to see a Gemara, our rabbis teach us you're not allowed to call Avram Avram. For only from the point before his name was changed is it permissible to refer to him as Avram and read the verses such as, but afterwards to refer to him as Avram would be, well, we'll see. There's actually an argument. Is it a violation of a positive mitzvah or a negative mitzvah? Keep in mind, in the verse itself, it says, your name shall no longer be called Avram. That would be a violation of the negative mitzvah. But your name shall be Avram. By calling him Avraham, by not calling him Avraham, you could be violating a positive mitzvah. With that in mind, let's go immediately to the Yakar itself. Here we go on page Kuf Sameh Gimel, it's 163. So Shimcha Yaakov lo Yikare Shimcha Od Yaakov. Right? We already read that and understood. Your name is Yaakov. You shall no longer be called Yaakov. And the Yakar points out, Mid Ka'amar, from that which is said. It actually says in the verse, your name is Yaakov. We do not find that, by the way, your name is Avraham. It doesn't use Shimcha Avraham. But by Yaakov, it does say that, and that's going to be part of the answer, the resolution, why you can call him both Yaakov and Yisrael. Mashma, what does that infer? Sheshem Yaakov Yishaer Bimekomo V'lo Yaker. That actually implies, by the verse telling you, your name is Yaakov, that the name Yaakov remains in place and is not uprooted. Because afterwards it says, Yakar Chachamar Lo Yikara Shimcha Od Yaakov. We know that it says you should no longer call him Yaakov. So what is the verse trying to tell me? Elavadai Shabolomar. Certainly, it's coming to tell me V'lo Shiyaker Shem Yaakov. By the very fact is your name is Yaakov, it's coming to tell me his name is not uprooted. Drum roll, please. Ela yetafel, but it will become secondary. It's not uprooted. We're third line down in that first paragraph. That it's tafel. What's tafel? Secondary, not the main name, not the important name. Somehow it's, as I said, secondary. You have another word for secondary? Tafel. VaYishlach Abraham. We see by Abraham, and I read the verse already in chapter 17, verse 5. See, there's a Gemara in Brachot 13a, and it actually says, and we can read it, it's number 3 on the source sheet. Is it? No. 1 second. It's not there. It's actually, it's number 4 on the source sheet, 13a. It says by Bar Kapara, in regards to Abraham's name, that anyone who calls Abraham Avram transgresses a positive mitzvah, because we saw the verse in 17:5, and your name shall be Avram, your name will be Avram. Rabbi Eliezer argues with Bar Kapara. He says, no, if you call Abraham Avram, you're violating a negative commandment, because the same verse says, your name shall no longer be called Avram. Let's stop there in terms of the source, but go back into the Yakar. He mentions in Hebrew, Aval Etzel Avraham, Chazal tell us, Kol Kori La Avram Avram. Anyone that calls to Abraham that name, Avram, he's over below Taseh. He violates a negative commandment. Hainu Taima, the Yakar says, what's the reason you violate the negative commandment? Shelo nemar etzel, etzlo, shimcha Avram, because it's missing those first 2 words that are in our Parsha. Our Parsha specifically says, your name is Yakov. Over by Avraham, it doesn't say, your name is Avram. Okay? That's how the first paragraph ends. V'altzad haremiz yesh makom iti lefarish shnei shemotav shel Yakov al shem shtei hagulot. We are entering a whole new dimension of redemption. Wait till you hear this. The difference between Yakov and Yisrael will play an important part in how we view ourselves as Jews, as individuals of the nation of Israel, our future destiny, and what it means to be called Yakov versus Yisrael. So, now you know what we're going to talk about. And that's what he says. There's an aspect of a hint. There is place for me to bring an explanation regarding the 2 names of Yakov, the 2 names of Yakov, one being Yisrael, in reference to 2 concepts of redemption. Ya'an ki matzino Rabbeinu Zal, we find in Gemara Brachot 12b, that's number 5 on the source sheet. So he says, I'll read the Yakar's concise explanation, then we'll go into the Gemara. Lo shetei aker yetziat Mitzrayim legamrei. When we think of the future redemption, it's going to be grand. See, right now we're in the birth pangs of the coming of the Messiah, which could be and probably will be extremely painful. But at the end of the day, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about the present day miracles, the unbelievable salvation that we all have experienced now and have experienced. And are we going to be talking about the leaving of Egypt? All the miracles of leaving of Egypt seem to, and I'm putting these in parentheses because this is how we normally think of it, will pale in comparison to the miracles that are going to happen at the end of days. You're in store for another level of understanding, but let's say that's how we think of it. So the idea of leaving Egypt will not be entirely uprooted. Ella shezachirat nise yatzei Mitzrayim yutafel. But remembering, mentioning all the miracles that happened 2,400 and actually the year 2,448. We're talking about over 3,500 years ago, 3,300 plus years ago. That will pale in comparison. And what will be the most things that we will be mentioning and remembering? V'zikaron nisim shelo asid yu ikar. All the miracles that are happening right now and will happen days to come. That is what we're going to be speaking about. That's what we're going to be mentioning. That's what we're going to be remembering. And he says, Cain Kan Amru. Now we understand in our Parsha with Yakov getting these two names. Lo Shiyeh Aker Shem Yakov Legamre. The name Yakov was never entirely uprooted. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but I mentioned before the class. The very fact that the Torah itself mentions back and forth the name of Yakov and then the name of Yisrael, consistently going back, obviously we didn't uproot the name Yakov. So not only does it say your name is Yakov, and that's what we're banking on here, but even God, he never refers to Avraham as Avram, except maybe when discussing the history. But he's not called Avram anymore. And therefore we shouldn't either, right? Because we imitate God. He created us in his image, and he follows halacha, and we follow the same halacha. Okay, so the Yakar goes on, and he says, Imke, if that's true, Shnehem Inyan Echad. Both names have to represent something, meaning the same thing. V'chein oimer begulach ron. Now he's taking us on a little journey to what we're going to call the final redemption. It should be soon in our days. And that verse is in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 4. That's number 6, the top of page 3. It says, every valley shall be raised, and every mountain and every hill shall be lowered, and the crooked terrain shall become a plain, Plain, and the close mountains a champaign. By the way, Champagne, Rashi, right, he lived in France as well, he says Champagne is a smooth and even terrain. And we looked it up today on Google. And it's true. The Champagne grapes grow in an area of France called Champagne, which is a smooth and even terrain. Okay, just file that somewhere, right? Okay, so what do we have here? In the Hebrew, when we talk about crooked, look at the word crooked. In Hebrew, it's Yakov. And what about the word for straight, like a straight place? That's called lemishur, like a plain, a straight plateau of sort. I think I might have skipped an important Rashi previously. If we go back to the first Rashi on chapter 35, verse 10, just understand the word Yaakov, not only does it mean heel, which is a very low place, it also means stealth and guile. Let's just use crooked, okay? Because that's our verse, which we just quoted in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 4, that it's a crooked terrain. It's deceptive and it's crooked. Okay, it's not straight. As opposed to Yisrael, the name we said was the hinted at in Isaiah 40, verse 4. It's going from Yakov to, right, from Yakov, from being crooked to being a straight plane. So lemishur. Mishur. Now the Yakar is explaining the word Mishur is a hint to the name Yisrael. I mean, you have except the mem, but you have basically the main consonants are the same. Okay, so that's important information regarding the future redemption. And the Yakar says the word Akov, which we know means either deceptive or crooked or low, it's Nigzar min Shem Yaakov, the same root as Yaakov. And the word Mishur, okay, listen to this. When God says your name shall be Yisrael, and because the word, right, is to contend with God. But Yisrael also means Sar'el, shall be the minister or the ambassadors. You're going to be the ministers of God. You are God's representatives here in this world. That's Yisrael. But it's also Yishar Kael. You go straight with God. You use no intermediaries. So for all those people of other religions, keep in mind, get rid of these intermediaries. For you Jews out there, money is not, the end game here. Okay? Trust in God. In God we trust. Okay? So we go straight to God without any intermediaries. And the Yakar says, Mishor Nigzar Min Shem Yisrael. Basically, it's the same root, Yashar Kale. Okay? Straight to God or straight with God. And how do we know this? It says, Ulafishan Amar. Now, since it says, this is a new idea, since it says in Micha, chapter 7, verse 15, as in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt, I will show him wonders. So this is also talking about a future event, as we're going to be witnessing and have been seeing ourselves the last 100 years, really. I mean, we've been around, right? These generations. But it says here in Hebrew, like just as the days when you left Egypt, I will show you wonders. So the question is, when I began by saying, we're going to see much more bigger niflaos, wonders and miracles happening in the future, maybe that's not true. Maybe, at worst, it'll be the same as Egypt. And if that's true, going back to our original question, why would the remembrance of what happens in the future outshine that which happened in Egypt? If it's the same, if it's amazingly the same. Okay? So Micha implies it may not be amazingly greater, it may just be as great, which is fine with me. I'm open for that. Okay, so that's going to be the question of the Yakar. He says, based on that verse, Shema Mina Shenisim Shalotid Lo Yu Gedoli Minisim Mitzrayim. The inference could be that the miracles that are going to take place in the future, which is just around the corner, will not be any greater. Maybe they'll just be as great. Lama Yunisi Mitzrayim Tafel. So why are we making this claim that the miracles that took place in Egypt 3,300 years ago pale in comparison to the miracles that are happening now or tomorrow? Great question, guys. So if I don't answer this, you're not going to sleep tonight or tomorrow or ever until you hear the answer. Here he begins the answer. Now, it may be hard for us to really comprehend. For those who are spiritually sensitive, it should be easier. So I'm working on my own spiritual sensitivity. Ela lefi shegeula shel Mitzrayim lo haya zechutam maspik lahotziam biyad ramah. We did leave Egypt in the day, not at night, running away. However, because we left with the Yad Ramah means like, hallelujah, we're leaving and we deserve it and we earned it. Head held up high. We did leave Egypt with a Yad Ramah, but we didn't earn it. We didn't deserve it. We were idol worshippers in Egypt. We were, I don't know what else. We were sinners. Let's leave it like that. We were sinners in Egypt. Of course, we kept certain traditions. We didn't speak Lashon Hara, it's a big deal. That's a big deal. But he says, V'hutrachu lelek ba'akva urmiyah. Because we didn't earn it, even though we did leave with the Yad Ramah, how should we have left? Because of our own merits, which we didn't have any? It would have been required of us to leave in not only a lowly fashion, but also in a type of fashion that is going to be described as deceptive, like the way the Erev Rav left in the middle of the night. See, we left it the following morning in daylight, okay, for all the Egyptians to see. The whole world had to see the Jews leaving Egypt. We didn't cower over, okay? We held our heads up high. That's what happens when you leave in the day. When you leave in the middle of the night, that's called stealthily, okay, and shamefully, okay? That's not how we left, although we deserved to have left like that because, and I'll bring the verse in Yecheskel shortly, 1 second. Ki amru, Nelek lizboach laHashem Elokeinu. Remember what we said to Pharaoh. Come, let us go. Right? Let us go, and for 3 days. There was a little deception there, right? We were ready for a full-fledged deception. By the way, I just want to mention, and I should have mentioned in the beginning, before any of our dignitaries ever went on a mission to do negotiations, whether it was in business or diplomacy, okay, with the enemy, with people who were not our best of friends, they always read and learned Parshat VaYishlach. Okay, it's in Midrash Shochatov. It's a big deal. Rabbi Yonasi would go to Rome and speak to them. He would always go into learn, because you need to know how to deal with your enemy. And this is not an accident that right now, with all that we've been going through, that negotiations are either being made. They're being made for sure. The question is, do we have the siyata d'shmaya, the help from heaven, to open up our minds to what we need to do and how we need to behave, how to behave. It's very important what I'm saying, and I'm sorry I missed it. Anybody who didn't hang in there for the last 20 minutes missed this before. I should have said it at the beginning. But it's Yakar. It's very important to know that. But anyway, what did we say to Pharaoh? We said, let us go. We're just going to go for 3 days and serve our God. And the kol boreach v'holech v'chipazon. See, in Exodus chapter 12, verse 11, we did leave quite quickly once we were allowed to leave. So there is a comparison, because the Erev Rav is actually 2/3 of the Jewish people. Yes, there were 3 million Jews that left. There were 6 million Erev Rav. There were 9 million people in the desert, and it's in a Mechilta. And I want to tell you this, that's the minimum. There's 2 other opinions that it's twice that and 3 times that of the Erev Rav. Yeah, unbelievable, right? We're walking around. They intermarried. They converted with us, and they're part of us, and they've been a pain in the side ever since. But anyway, going back to the Yakar, he says that's how we should have left. In fact, we even asked to leave that way. And so in Exodus chapter 12, verse 11, and this is how you shall eat it. Your loins grew girded, right? We ate the matzah. Why do we eat matzah? Because of the idea that we had to get out in haste. Your shoes on your feet, the staff in your hand, and you shall eat in haste. It's a Passover sacrifice to the Lord. V'yachaltem oto b'chipazon. Chipazon means quickly, and even Rashi says there, a term denoting haste and speed. Okay, then what about the exile of Babylon? When we were finally redeemed from Babylon, the Geulat Bavel, Pshita Shelo Hayasa Geula Shlema. It's obvious that was not the final redemption, and it was not a complete redemption. Ki'im Pakida Ba'alma. It was just an appointed time, right? God said, you're going to be exiled for the amount of time, so you didn't keep the Shemitah year, right? So the amount of Shemitah years that we missed, over 490 years, so we were exiled, or 420 years, whatever, can't do the math right now, but we were exiled for the 70 years for the Shemitot that we did not keep. So it was a point in time. That's what it means. It was not a complete redemption. The Gam Shanemar, and even when we left Babylon, look in Isaiah chapter 48, verse 20. It says, leave Babylon, flee from the Chaldeans. Sa'u mi Bavel, birchu mi Kazdim. So in other words, you have to run. These types of redemptions involved a running, a shameful, perhaps even lowly state for the Jewish people. But in the future, I tell you, not me, I'm telling you what it says. We are going to leave with our heads held up high because we earned it. Wow, that's like a big jump. Well, listen to what the Yakar says. So we just read, right. V'lo ba'akva, v'lo v'chipazon. I skipped something again. I'm going to go back. Avav the Gulach Rona, when it comes to the later or the last redemption, this is so important. After all of our sins have been expunged, is it because we did tshuva? Yeah, or we suffered. Either way, right? I just want to go over these ideas. There's A, B, and C. God created the world, and He wants to give us reward. So He gave us mitzvahs. Okay, you don't do the mitzvahs, guess what? Then you missed plan A. There's plan A, do the mitzvahs, cling to God, have a relationship with God, be happy. Okay? That's plan A. God knows that we're not all perfect. We're not, I'm talking for myself here. We're not all perfect. See, plan B. Plan B is tshuva. right? There's a way out. Okay, got plan B. But he also knows that we're just flesh and blood, and we might not do tshuva perfectly. So there's plan C. Plan C is suffering. So you got mitzvahs. Plan A. Okay, we're human. Tshuva. And we don't do tshuva perfectly. If we don't do tshuva completely and perfectly, there's plan C. And he says like this. So at the final redemption, after we've been expunged, emptied, purified from our sins, mikol v'kol, in its entirety, ba'oreg galut hachel zeh, through the hard, long exile. Don't worry. If you didn't do plan A and you didn't do plan B, plan C will take care of itself. Okay? It will be hard and suffering exile we have been through. And we will be what? Yaspik zuchutam. Then we will automatically be have enough merits. Sheyetzu biyad ramah. That final redemption. I mean, you know what we're going through now. We are, by the way, chapter 53 of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 53, the suffering servant, that is the Jewish people. If you read all through the 40s and in the beginning of the 50s, and even, what does God call his suffering, his servant? He says, Yakov, my servant. Israel is my servant. Okay? So anybody who thinks that that's not the case, go back to kindergarten. Okay, here we go. So the Yakar says that it will be sufficient. Our merits will be sufficient. Sheyetzu biyad ramah, that the Jewish people will go out in the final redemption with a hand held up high, meaning our heads held up high. Bimishor, like the name Yisrael, like a flat plane that is not lowly, right? Velo ba'akva, not lowly or deceitful. Velo b'chipazon, and certainly not even out of haste. So it says in Isaiah chapter 52, verse 12. It says over there, for not with haste shall you go forth, and not in a flurry of flight shall you go. Ki lo b'chipazon teitzeu, ubimnusa lo telechu. That final redemption will not be in haste or fleeing. Okay? And this is what it means, going back to Isaiah chapter 40, verse 4, where it says, Haya ha'akov lemishor, that the crooked places will be flattened, will be straight. Again, going from the state of Yakov to the state of Israel. The state of Israel. The status. When we call makom le'yaker shem Yakov legamre. But the name Yakov is not entirely uprooted. V'chein lo ye'aker zikaron yitziat Mitzrayim legamre. Just like the remembrance that we left Egypt will not be entirely uprooted either. Rather, kedei sheyizkaru shtei hagalut yachad. We'll be remembering the future redemption, the one that's happening now, along with what happened 3,300 years ago. But it's important to know this. V'yedu v'yakiru hevdel shebeinehem asher garam achet. You will know, they will know, and they will recognize that there's a big difference between them. Now, which sin caused. Sin is the reason for exile. It says in Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 8. I mean, we know this from tradition, but Ezekiel says, but they rebelled against me and would not consent to hearken to me. They did not cast away every man the despicable idols from before their eyes, neither did they forsake the idols of Egypt. And I said, to pour out my wrath on them, to give my anger full reign over them in the midst of the land of Egypt. This is referring to the Jews when they were still idol worshippers in Egypt. Rashi says they are the wicked, the majority of Israel who died in the 3 days of darkness. By the way, we went up chamushim, we went up armed. The word chamush, right? You go into a bank or a store. Banks, they don't do it anymore. You go into a hospital, you go into a place where they have a guard, and they look at you and they say, are you chamush? I want to tell you something. the word chamush, like givat hatachmoshet. Chamush means armed, no question about it. It also, like Rashi says, kli zayin, zayin, kli zayin. Over on that pasuk, kli zayin means armed. I want to tell you some really interesting piece of information. So Chazal tell us only 1/5 of the Jews left Egypt. 4/5 died in the 9th plague of darkness. That's what Rashi says over here. And then there's another opinion, not 1 out of 5, 1 out of 50. Many, many wicked Jews died. We were not tzaddikim when we were in Egypt. What I want to tell you is this. The Yakar explains. He says, what do you mean we went up chamush? He's very bothered by that. We were slaves. We didn't know how to use arms. And not only that, the Medrash says we went out with 5 identical weapons. Everyone had the same. What a miracle. And we didn't even know how to use them. Something's wrong with the picture. He says this word, chamush, means weapons. It means the 5 books of Moses. We left Egypt willing to accept the Torah. In other words, we didn't really receive it yet until Har Sinai and then through the desert. But before we even left, we knew we were the servants of God. We knew that we were going to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. And it's as if we had already received it in our hearts. So next time you go through one of those turnstiles and they ask you if you're chamush, whip out your chumash and say, I'm armed. I'm armed. This is the instrument that's going to win the war. Yeah, we do need our weapons, as we explained. If you don't do everything that's necessary from a natural point of view, Hashem will not fulfill all the miracles and take care of the enemy. First, you do that, and then Hashem will take care of everything else. The Chumash is the Tanakh, Torah in general, is our weapon of war. Okay, with that in mind, going back to the Yakar. We just quoted Yecheskel. He says, "Asher mizeh hatzad roi sheyitafel." From the aspect that we were what? We were not really fit. We were not really fit to be redeemed on a high level. That's why it was secondary, tafel. Kain sham shem Yakov lo ne'eker legamre mizetam. And that's why the name Yakov is actually not entirely uprooted. Even in this geula, we need both. Va'od shagula mishameshet shtei geulot. The redemption itself, this future redemption, uses 2 aspects of redemption. What are they? This is where we're going to get into the Rabbeinu Bechaya, and this is where we get into a little bit of Kabbalistic and mystical teachings. He says, Hein geulat hagufot, min shibud v'tzarot. So there's going to be what we call redemption or salvation physically from the subjugation and the pains, the anti-Semitism, right? From the physical pains. But there's another type of redemption, hagulat hanefesh. There's a salvation or a redemption on a soul level. Mitzad ha'inyanim haruchnaim shenidnu liYisrael. Regarding the spiritual concepts that were given over to the status of Israel, to the state of the Jewish people. Kahora'at Shem Yakov Yisrael, like the names Yakov and Israel represent. Echad Chamri, one of those, which we know now is Yakov, represents the more physical state. The Echad Ruchani, and the second of the more spiritual state. Kedisa b'Rabbeinu Bechaya. And the last page, I'm going to go through with you because I think it's really important. Before we go through the Rabbeinu Bechaya, I'm going to finish the last 3 lines. Afal pisha ruchani Yakar. Even though it's true that the spiritual is the main part, and that's going to be equivalent to Yisrael. Mikol makom. Nevertheless, the Shem Yakov, the name Yakov was lo yaker legabre, was never entirely uprooted. Why? Because a person is incorporated with both aspects, and both need to be activated. Aval Shem Avram, back to our original question, why Avram was not used. Sorry, Avram was entirely uprooted. Ne'ekar legamre. We don't call Abraham Avram anymore. Ki leolam b'kol hadoros harei hu av hamon goyim. Because in truth, he is that's his name, Abraham. He is literally the father of, at least, we know the religions, the main religions. They call them I don't know, they call them the great religions. I have a hard time saying that, but okay. Christianity, they claim to follow Abraham's teachings, and the Muslims certainly claim. They claim. They claim. It's a false claim, but okay. Not there's certain. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that they follow. They should follow from Abraham. There's no doubt. Kigam ahale adom v'yishmael motzayei cholotzav hema. There's no doubt, he says, also that the population, the tents of Edom and Yishmael, the tents, the population of Christianity and Islam came from his. Well, actually, he's talking about literally their seed, but we know that their seed is more of a concept, and it spread into these two major. That's not great, but major. Okay, major religions came from his loins. Now, what I'd like to take you on is a little journey into the Rabbeinu Bechaya. The Rabbeinu Bechaya is based on Genesis chapter 47, verses 28 and 29. Keep in mind, when Yakov's about to die, it says Yakov lived, so the name Yakov's used in the land of Egypt for 17 years, and Yakov's days, the amount of his life was 147. And the next verse says, when the time drew near for Israel to die. So even at his death, it's using both names. So, and on page 683 of the book that you have it in front of you, it's a lot to read, but I will tell you the interesting things. He begins just by mentioning that throughout the Torah, both Yisro and Yakov are used interchangeably when it's referring to Yakov, and the name Yakov appears 6 times. The name Yisrael appears 13 times. I say that's significant, but we're not going to get into it. Here, from a more scientific and rational point of view, we may detect a distinct pattern in the Torah, sometimes choosing to refer to Yakov by his original name, and sometimes by his additional name. The name Yakov applies to the physical part of Yaakov's personality, matters connected to his terrestrial existence, whereas the name Yisrael refers to the spiritual aspects of his personality, matters connected to his eternal existence in celestial regions. When Yakov had first been given the name Yaakov, the Torah stated this was reflected because he was holding on to the heel of his brother Esau. We find the name Yisrael first used in connection with Yakov, having successfully contended with the celestial force representing his brother Esau. It is therefore clear that the additional name, we're calling an additional name, not a replacement name, Yisrael was intended principally to reflect Yaakov's spiritual accomplishments. So that would be the first solid explanation, as we've been talking about, what Yisrael represents. Seeing that it is impossible for a human being, while part of a body, to divest himself totally of bodily needs and concerns, which we said that's why a person is given both portions. You're not just a spirit. You're like a jockey riding on a horse. Your body is your vehicle, is your horse. You have to take care of it, feed it, guard it, love it. At the same time, know that you're really a spirit having a physical. Are you? Are we a spirit having a physical experience, or are we physical people having a spiritual experience? I would say we're really the jockey. The jockey is the spirit. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. Okay, but we're both. You cannot deny that. Seeing that, okay, fine. So I'm going to read that again. Seeing that it is impossible for a human being, while part of a body, to divest himself totally of bodily needs and concerns, we can appreciate what our sages said, that contrary to the name Avraham, which actually totally replaced the name Avram, the name Yisrael did not replace the name Yaakov. It reflected the fact that Yakov had attained an additional dimension in his personality development. I'm going to skip to the next page. Oh, no. Let me just read a few more lines. Therefore, the name Yakov henceforth became subordinate to that, Tafel, secondary to that of Yisrael. The use of these names teaches, amongst other matters, that if someone makes his spiritual dimension subordinate to his physical, terrestrial concerns, this kills him. It leads to his death sooner or later. Okay, I want to turn the page and go down to the middle paragraph, just the first 8 lines of the middle paragraph. Upon closer examination, you will find that when the Torah employs the name Yakov to describe our patriarch, it refers to his terrestrial concerns which are indispensable for any human being, and it's a physical, whereas when it switches by calling him Israel, it refers to his spiritual concerns, matters which are largely abstract. This is what the prophet Isaiah chapter 43 verse 1 had in mind when he said, "Who created you, O Yakov? Who formed you, O Israel?" Keep in mind the word create is Bariah and formed is Yetzirah. We have these in Kabbalah, these 4 different levels of creation, Bria being the lowest, and that referring to Yakov. The next step up is Yisrael, and that would be Yetzirah. And the verse itself, Isaiah 43, says that specifically how these names are used differently. In connection with the name Yaakov, the prophet only mentioned the word Bria, a primitive kind of creation, whereas in connection with spiritual parts of man, the prophet speaks of a more sophisticated product, one that has undergone Yetzirah, an advanced form of formation. I'm going to leave it at that. I want you all to go through and review and see the Reina Bechaya in full by itself. But what do we see here? First of all, halavai, we should all live up to the name Yisrael. Okay, that's the first thing. We see Yakov that name represented a lower aspect. It's true, physical. You cannot totally uproot the physical. We are here to uplift the physical world into higher spiritual dimensions. The only way, right, unless you're really spiritually gifted, you go out and you meditate in the field and get in touch with nature, but it's very difficult. The best way, aside from that, or in conjunction with that, is to learn Torah. The Torah is God's instruction manual, and he lays it all out. And I had a conversation today with somebody who says, well, it's not explicit in the Torah. I said, but the Torah itself says God gave you Torot. Torot is plural. He gave you a written Torah, it's true, but he gave us an oral Torah. Every word, every sentence, every nuance is explained. What do you think we spent 40 years doing? Wandering in circles? We were 28 years in one place. We everywhere we went was with a mission in mind. We had 42 specific journeys. And the Yakar explains each one of the 42 journeys that the Jewish people experience in the desert, every human being experiences within his own life, her own life, 42 distinct levels of life and journeys. And with that, I wish you a great life, a good Shabbos, a victory if we are together. And Bezrat Hashem, we will continue to stick together. And we'll see you, I'm not sure next week, but happy Hanukkah, and we'll see you soon. Call to. Bye.
Yiboneh, 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 Yiboneh,